Brought to you by MuleSoft, provider of the industry-leading AnyPoint platform for APIs.
First of all, full disclosure, I'm not going to go deep into technology speak because I've seen some of the talks here over the last few hours, and there are some very smart people who understand a lot more about technology and APIs than I ever will, so I'm going to decline gracefully in going head-to-head with those guys. So I'm going to come at it, give me some creative license, I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle. I've been at Addison Lee just under 2 weeks now, I think, not even 2 weeks at the moment, and for the previous kind of 16, 17 years before, I was lucky enough to work at some of the world's leading digital interactive agencies and leading some amazing teams as we built some really interesting digital products and services for Nike, Xbox and other brilliant brands. So I'm going to come at this more from a marketing angle. So I'm going to start wide and then come back into some of the work that Addison Lee has just started to kick off with Concur and the use of APIs in that space. So I want to start really quite wide, as I mentioned, that I think we all know this, but marketing in the modern era for brands has changed forever. I don't think this is news, really, but the world where kind of mass interruptive advertising was the norm has changed, and it has pretty much changed forever. Those days of spending big bucks on TV spots and hoping that will do the trick have well and truly gone, especially as we now have more touch points, devices and channels to connect with people than ever before. And I think I just wanted to highlight a few examples of this that I think are just really interesting and give us food for thought as marketeers and product leaders out in the industry. I think we all saw this, I think it was last year's Super Bowl. They had a power outage. And the Oreo social media team, with their agency, reacted in double quick time and created a tweet and an image that pretty much went around the world instantaneously. And it was known as Dunk in the Dark. It actually outperformed very expensive TV spots and impressions during the Super Bowl as well. So very cheap to produce, of the moment, really smart version of real-time marketing. So just something to think about. Another example is a brand that is probably more well known in the States called Krispy Kreme, who have been performing remarkably well over the last decade or so. They have no agency of record. They spend zero money on traditional advertising, certainly in the TV space. I'm sure they do some print stuff. They have been built from the ground up pretty much through social media, community managers, and kind of grassroots marketing. And the last one, I think, if you put aside the fact that Starbucks like to flood cities with more branches than any cities can take, Starbucks pretty much started their journey as a grassroots, community-based coffee shop and decided to create an environment where people could gather. They do not advertise on TV at all. They spend very little on traditional advertising. So my point is the world has changed forever, and I think brands and the modern era of marketing have more opportunities than ever before, more interesting ways to connect with people. And I was thinking about today, and I was thinking, well, how has marketing changed for brands? And I think an interesting adage is this term up on screen that you hear a lot certainly in the IT computer industry from 30, 40 years ago, and it's probably still used today as well, where they said that software sells hardware. And I think that's really apt primarily because of digital, all brands are now becoming software brands. And if you take that thinking through, brands like Airbnb actually don't own anything physically. They are basically a software platform, and they sell, as we know, unused inventory from people's individuals' properties and spaces around the world. They use software to sell hardware. Certainly, the same could be said of Amazon, especially in the early days, where they took the market by storm by providing a great platform, some smart personalization, some one-click buying. There were some nice initiatives and innovations in there where they sold hardware, books and other items through a piece of software. They've obviously expanded into web services and cloud computing, etc., and that's actually probably more of an income than their original business model. And the last one's kind of tongue-in-cheek when I think about software selling hardware. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this example. I love it because it is literally the epitome of software selling hardware. So this is from the Red Tomato Pizza Company in the Middle East. They created a fridge magnet which you can press the button and your favorite pizza will turn up at the door. And that's pretty much all you have to do. It is a low-powered Bluetooth fridge magnet which connects directly to your mobile phone, calls your favorite pizza takeaway restaurant. The restaurant recognizes the phone number and the fact that Nick likes a large pepperoni today pizza, and all I have to do is press the button and a pizza will turn up at my doorstep, already paid for, it already knows who I am. And the example of that is a great example of a brand providing an absolutely frictionless experience for their consumers. And the point I'm making here is that software is very much the primary and visible expression of a modern brand. And modern brands have to think about digital and everything else out there on the world in that sensibility. But it's not really enough because we've seen these lessons before, and I kind of wanted to just take a step back to think about some categories and markets where we've seen that kind of behavior happen before. MP3 market. Classic example of a brand understanding that they are pretty much a software brand. So MP3 market, Apple, as we well know, do not actually invent anything. They just go into categories and execute at a far superior level. So certainly Sony, Philips, I'm sure there are lots of manufacturers should have actually stolen a march and taken a lead in the MP3 market. But Apple, through beautiful design, a great piece of easy-to-use software, a crafted brand, and obviously they locked people into the iTunes ecosystem, have absolutely stolen a march in the MP3 market. Same example can be said for social media. I don't know how many people are old enough, but I certainly remember MySpace from the early days, and they were the forerunner for social media. And they should have taken the space that Facebook have now taken. But Facebook took a lead again because they built a piece, they understood their primary expression of their brand was software, and they decided to build a piece of software that was easier to use. They made photo uploading probably one of the easiest ways to do it back in the day from a good 6-8 years ago, and they created a good old-fashioned killer feature called Newsfeed, which is now pretty much oxygen to over 1 billion people on the planet. And my last example, and I apologise for the Apple references because I think we all get bored of listening about them, is the smartphone market, where, again, companies like Nokia, and certainly companies like Motorola as well, missed an opportunity to take a leadership position in this category. And again, Apple, they didn't do anything that revolutionary. They didn't invent any new technology or IP. They just executed at a better level. So they created a product that was easier to use, it was more accessible, and it brought to market things that people could do that they weren't quite sure they could do before. And, you know, I could go on for hours with lots of categories where there are brands who understand that software is a major primary visible expression of how they express themselves to consumers. And I think those lessons, there's a few learnings that I take from those lessons that I think as a modern marketeer and anyone working with brands at the moment need to take forward, is that they all show examples of how brands thought about creating something that was simple, that was easy to use, that was genuinely useful for people, that was delightful, that was beautifully designed, and that was fundamentally accessible in the most easiest way possible. And I think that those are good learnings for any brand if they're looking at the modern marketing landscape at the moment. And of course, these examples also illustrate how fickle people are. That loyalty is very, very transient in our modern landscape, and people are very happy to switch quite quickly to the next thing. And of course, you know, we're now operating in a world where competitors are pretty much only a click away. And this is real food for thought for anybody managing a brand or a marketing team in the 21st century. These are just the realities of the landscape that we have to work within. And of course, the world continues to change at such a frightening pace. You know, I was playing with my 3-year-old and 5-year-old this morning. They were fighting yet again over the iPad. And it's amazing to see how naturally, certainly the younger generation live with technology. And I am genuinely quite jealous because I wish I was their age so I could see where this all plays out. I think we're like 2 laps into a 20-lap race, and it'll be really interesting to see where it plays out. But also, I think it's a great time to be alive. I think we have access to more information, knowledge, and opportunities than ever before. So I think it's a really interesting space to be at the moment. And from a consumer behavior landscape point of view, the sheer variety and pace of devices, platforms, and channels is transforming consumer expectations, which in turn is providing some amazing opportunities on the marketing landscape. And people, you know, they want everything they can, and they want it integrated, and they want it all at once. This is a tool that I believe Concur now own called TripIt. It gives you the ability to consolidate one journey into one place. So you get your hotel, your transport, your restaurants, and everything else all into one place. It's a good example of how people are now expecting brands and software to bring everything together in one place and make it easy for them. And also, people want everything available all at once. This isn't the iPhone 6, even though it looks quite bendy. It is actually the Samsung Galaxy Gear smartwatch. So we're now going to have the availability to be connected to our favorite technology platforms just by the flick of a wrist. And Tim Cook, when he presented this, used the words personal and intimate, I think about 25 times. Someone counted it online. So it's a good example of, you know, and I think it's more of a theoretical debate about how close do we want to get close to technology. Is the next step, are we going to be injecting nanotechnology into our bloodstream to fix our livers? You can ask Ray Kurzweil about that, who now works at Google. And if you haven't seen a great documentary called The Point of Singularity, you should watch that if you want to really be terrified about the future. But it is genuinely an interesting place where obviously we've heard lots of noise about wearable technology at the moment, but people are becoming more comfortable having stuff available on them, available at all times. And as always, people have an insatiable appetite for new things, and they want it available all at once. They want all the new and interesting stuff that they can share, and they want it available as soon as possible. There was a good quote from Kevin Spacey, I think about 2 days ago. He presented at a US CMO conference, so I'll give him the credit because I quite like this quote. He goes, "The audience doesn't care about the platform, they care about the content." So sometimes I think we all get a bit too focused on wearable tech and nanotech and graphene and everything else, all the wonderful stuff out there. But consumers genuinely don't really care about that stuff. They just want brilliant content, and they want to be able to control it. And talking of control, even though consumers want unlimited choice, let's not forget that they are in control. I don't think I have to explain this slide to many people at the moment, but when Apple in U2 decided to inject themselves into millions of people's music libraries overnight with the iOS 8 update, I think it's fair to say that it didn't go down too well. So from being one of the world's most favourite bands, I think it's fair to say they're probably one of the most hated. And I think in the last few days, they actually released a Remove U2 button on iTunes, which I thought was quite funny. So all these learnings and you know, really illustrate to us that people want to interact with brands on their terms in a place of their choosing. And this is a sidewalk in South Korea, which you know, I don't know if we'll see in every major city, but it's a good example of people are actually willing to trade their primal urge to walk without looking at technology and actually walk in a lane dedicated to smartphone users. So if you've ever been in London and been stuck behind anybody on the tube or the escalator on a Oxford Street, you'll know what I'm talking about when people slow down because their faces are looking at a screen. So I think it's just a really interesting time to understand consumer behavior and the way people are adopting to technology. So in this environment, I suppose the challenge is, you know, what is a brand to do? That's a lot to take in. There's a lot of devices, there's a lot of touch points, there's a lot of software platforms. And what is a brand to do in this landscape? The first advice I would give is brands have to break through the noise. I think, as I've mentioned before, people have the power. The world has fundamentally changed. Consumers now have the power to filter out brands from whenever they want. They've got more devices, more touch points, more bits of software on them than ever before, which allow them to decide which brands they leave into their lives or not. So brands have to recognize that that is the reality of the landscape. So it's important that we cut through with relevant, engaging, exciting content. The second observation is the brands that are winning are the ones that remove the pain. And by that I mean I spend a lot of time online, as you would imagine, and I think I'm fairly proficient compared to most people out there, just because I've been doing it since like '96, and I love the digital space. And I still get quite sad when I spend a lot of time online. I still find it quite hard. I think there's only a handful of sites and apps that are well crafted and well designed. And if I find it hard, can you imagine what people like who don't spend a lot of time online find it? So I think it's a brand's responsibility to understand that's the context that we're working within, and to help people and to make people's lives just a little bit easier, and to remove barriers and to fundamentally remove some pain from people's lives. The last piece is, let's also remember that people, especially Generation Y and millennials, and unfortunately I'm not either of those, are very, very comfortable in sharing. And it's something that a brand can actually use to their advantage. You might as well acknowledge that is the case, and people are always looking for social currency so they can share on various platforms. So give people something to talk about. This is an example from that Volvo did with the Van Damme, doing the splits between two Volvos. Again, great media impressions, a lot cheaper than a TV spot, etc., etc. Good example of a brand doing something interesting. And lastly, let's not forget that life can be all a little bit too serious sometimes. So brands should really think about making people laugh and using humor where they can. If you create an emotional reaction inside somebody, they are much more likely to remember you, they're much more likely to come back to you, and they're much more likely to share your brand with other people. So those are just a few observations about a few things that brands can do in the modern marketing landscape. So getting on to the topic at hand, what do APIs offer marketing and product teams within this ever-changing landscape? And for me, I think it's pretty simple, really. I mean, I've been lucky enough to be working with some brilliant technology teams, both client-side and within the agency world, for a long, long time. And for me, APIs are pretty much the glue. That's the way I view them, that's the way the clients view them, that's the way we kind of see them in the marketing world. And to explain that, they allow a brand to connect with absolute minimum friction to people in a place of their choosing. So for me, the key words on there are really connection, a brand connecting with real people, not consumers, not users, not target audience. They're actually real human beings, and we shouldn't forget that, and with minimum friction. So people are happy to connect with brands if they're provided some value and some interesting, engaging content. And I think it's our responsibility to recognize that APIs allow us to connect with people and remove the friction and remove the pain in people's lives. And that's just an interesting point that we've been thinking about, that I certainly think about as I lead a marketing and product team. And some of the specific benefits are APIs really will allow us, if we use them the right way, to provide a seamless and ubiquitous experience for our customers. They hopefully should allow us to offer much more targeted, relevant, tailored, personalized products to allow brands to connect with people. They certainly allow us to share in a two-way sense even more data. Not that we need more of it, because I think every organization is struggling at the moment with what to do with so much data. There's certainly an interesting component that will allow some very interesting discussions within the corporate world to drive innovation and new products and services under certain brands. And for me, you know, they create digestible, portable services that can be placed on other platforms. And I think in the way the world has changed in the software world, where now, you know, there are open standards, everyone's much more open and sharing with each other. It's a real opportunity for any brand who's got an interesting piece of technology to package it up and to place it in other people's worlds. And for me, you know, the lens over that is, let's think about where the consumers are. Let's think about where your audience are naturally living their lives. And then we now have the ability through APIs to put ourselves in front of them in their most natural habitat, which I think is a really interesting, powerful place to investigate. So APIs are very much a critical component of any modern marketeer's armory. But I'm going to take that with a bit of a caveat. Just because we can integrate, it doesn't mean we always should. And I want to just bring up a simple diagram that I've been using for a long time when I talk to many brands, and certainly I'll be talking within Addison Lee as well when I spend some time with them, that when we think about creating a new digital product, service or experience, you really have to look at it from a holistic point of view. And what you're looking for is a balanced set of answers to these three questions. So, at the top of the triangle, is it useful and is it genuinely usable for a customer? So you've got to put the customer first, okay? Is it something that people genuinely want to interact with, and have you crafted it for it to be as usable as possible? From a business point of view, is it sustainable? So from a commercial sense, does it make sense for both brands? Do both brands get some value out of it? Can we make some money out of it? Is there a fair exchange of information or commercials around it? And from a last point of view, technology point of view, is it feasible? Is it remotely feasible? Is it even possibly feasible to make it happen? Because it's very easy to look at all the opportunities to use APIs and integrate with lots of different platforms and products and services, but it doesn't mean we always should. And the point here is you really have to look at these three areas and think, is it right for the customer? Does it make sense for the business? And is it something technically that can be achieved? And I think an observation coming to this conference was that a lot of developers are focusing on creating, for example, apps very much in the consumer segment. But there does seem to be an untapped opportunity in the business travel market. Speaking to Concur, looking at some of their research, which you're going to see now in the next few slides, and getting under the skin of Addison Lee, there seems to be a real missed opportunity within the business travel market. And that's because everyone is so focused on creating the next greatest app for consumers to use. But there seems to be a great opportunity in the business travel market. So let's just think about the business travel market. The mindset and context of a business traveller is pretty clear. When business travellers hit the road, efficiency rules. That's pretty much all they're worried about. The less time they spend booking hotels, finding transport, anticipating any delays to the journey, the better. And of course, because they're on the move, mobile devices are the first place that they're going to look for. And these are some great stats that I'll give credit to Concur, who can't be here today, but have provided recently. So it's a really good indication of, if there are any developers out there thinking, should I create some apps for consumers, I would think about also looking at the business travel market as well. So there's a huge opportunity looking at the business travel market. The number of trips per year is substantially higher in the business travel market. They're more likely to be members of a VIP frequent flyer program. The average spend per trip, as you can see, is substantially higher. They spend longer trip duration for business travel trips, and they're more likely to use their mobile devices. These are all from the US market from last year. So, you know, and some amazing stats in there. And if you look, they nudged over $1 trillion last year in business travel expenditure. And that's just the US. We haven't even looked at Europe and other regions of the world. Over 2/3 of bookings, of travel bookings in the world, are business. 8 in 10 rate travel apps as adding to their travel experience when they're on business travel. 74% rate business travel as important to improving profits. So if you need to have a chat with your CFO and get some stuff pushed through, I think that stat alone will be interesting. And only 10 of the top 50 iOS apps in the App Store are business travel related. So for me, looking the outside in, that looks like a massive opportunity to do something really interesting in a market that is very, very healthy. And in our specific travel world, and Addison Lee obviously provides premium ground transportation services, there is actually a missing API aggregator in our world. The closest to come to it is a platform called CabForce that's trying to integrate with some of the bigger GDS travel platforms such as Amadeus, etc. We'll see where that works out. That could be an interesting play. But is it the right play? We're not sure yet. So we decided to sit down with Concur and have a discussion about how Addison Lee can package up the mature API that we have coming off our very interesting technology stack. And trust me, the more I'm learning about it in the last 2 weeks, it's a really interesting piece of technology sitting powering the business of Addison Lee. So we decided to package that up as an API and look to integrate with the world's leading travel and expense platform, Concur. Although I was thinking of overriding that logo with SAP, because I understand they're going to get bought by SAP as of last week. So just to give you a bit of a headline news on Addison Lee. Addison Lee was founded in '75 by one person with one minicab. It now has a fleet of over almost 5,000 cars in London, with affiliate partnerships operating in 350 cities worldwide. We service 70% of the FTSE 100, so quite a corporate-based business, but we have a lot of big corporate accounts. We move over 10 million passengers per year with Addison Lee, which is an astounding number. We've actually reduced the number of what we call dead miles in our industry by 18,000, and that's because we have a very smart auto allocation technology sitting behind. And if you come into the Addison Lee headquarters, like I did on my interviews, it was really interesting to see this massive map of cars moving around London with a really smart algorithm moving the car nearest to your trip and reducing the number of dead miles. A really interesting business. And we're on average 30% cheaper than most black cabs. And at the moment, we're backed by a big private equity fund. We're looking at international expansion at the moment, and it's actually a really exciting time, especially with those cheeky fellas over at Uber making this segment even more interesting. And Concur, been around since '93, launched a travel expense and end-to-end solution back then. They process over 55 million expense transactions and over £29 billion worth of purchase volume alone in the UK, so a really interesting platform. 120,000 trips booked through Concur every day. They have over almost 500 expense customers, and if you add in the Concur travel customer, well over 500. And they deal with over almost 3 billion in UK ground transportation in the whole of last year, which is very relevant to Addison Lee. So as a partnership, the partnership is pretty much founded on 3 areas. One, in London, this is the London-only number, and even I was astounded when I joined Addison Lee, that there is over £3 billion spent predicted for this year on ground transportation in London only, of which Addison Lee have under 10%. So there's plenty of market for everybody to play with, including Uber, and it was a really interesting partnership to think about with Concur. It's a very fragmented competitive set. We've mentioned Uber already. Obviously, you're up against black cabs. You're up against other technology providers disrupting the market, such as Halo, and also some of the smaller minicab firms out there as well. And the last reason for the partnership is because we share actually quite a few big clients together. Credit Suisse, Bank of America, Allen & Overy, and Burberry, to name just a few. So when we sat down with Concur and talked about what we could do together, there were some natural synergies that we thought were worth looking at. And the initial phase of the engagement is really going to be focused around 3 areas. The first point is we're going to offer a direct connection where Addison Lee customers can book within the Concur platform directly cars as they book other travel options on the Concur platform, and vice versa. So as Addison Lee customers using the website or the app in the near future will be able to book other Concur travel options. So there's a direct connection between both platforms. Again, we've made it a digestible, portable service where customers can book additional services without opening up other browsers or going to other pieces of software. A really interesting development is the ability to place automatically electronic receipts into Concur customers' expense accounts. So reducing loads of admin, loads of hours and transparency issues around when you travel with Addison Lee, you'll automatically get an e-receipt into your Concur travel expense account, which is really interesting. And thirdly, the ability to create integrated itineraries in the Concur TripIt platform. So more and more customers are using TripIt to plan one trip in one place, to have all the components of one trip into one place. Again, Addison Lee API will integrate with Concur's technologies to ensure that information is passed directly through into one central location. And we're doing that with a joint marketing, go-to-market and other sales initiatives to try and push through those 3 pillars of the initial proposition with Concur. And I think the learnings to date, and we are in the early stages of this integration, but there's a few customers that we're trialing it out on the moment, is really interesting for me for how 2 big commercial organizations are looking to connect to 2 platforms that are actually quite different. So some very obvious learnings at the beginning are make sure you agree the commercials early. It's going to be very difficult to secure resources inside any corporate environment unless you have a very clear commercial plan and it's something that everybody buys into and that both companies feel like there's real value on either side. Securing resources is absolutely critical. We know how stretched all our teams are when they're working through absolutely rows of projects that are delayed inside corporate environments. But to execute an integration with APIs, you have to have some resources at some point dedicated to it. Senior stakeholder support, you could say this for almost any IT project in any organization, is absolutely critical. And really do not underestimate the legacy systems. We've seen some wonderful anomalies and nuances as we get under our technology, let alone from the Concur point of view as well. So as much as you put time and effort against those integration efforts, there will always be things that come up that are a surprise to everybody. And along the way, and this is often forgotten, let's be honest, because everyone's so busy trying to get the project delivered, make sure you package everything, document everything, package it. It's really important because this isn't the only time you're going to do this. You're going to want to pass this on to other brands and other partners. So make sure as you work along the way, make sure you're packaging everything along the way. And lastly, certainly do not forget about the end user. Do not forget about the reason why we do all of this stuff, which is connect with real people. It's very easy for a lot of us to sit in lots of hot, sweaty boardrooms and meeting rooms around the world and not have the customer in the room and design API integration without thinking about the end user. So really, I kind of wanted to end with the fact that APIs for Addison Lee are very much the start of our journey. And it's the start of a journey to present ourselves to the right people in the right place at the right time. And it's been a really interesting first steps with Concur, and I think we're going to do lots more of them. We've got lots of partnerships lined up at the moment, and we're very much open to many more because we want to put ourselves where our customers are and make sure we're in a place that they are naturally habitating with as minimum friction as possible. So that was pretty much all I had from me. I'm under time as well, so I won't get towed off by the engineer in the top right-hand side of the room. I'm happy to take any questions, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen.
Brought to you by MuleSoft, provider of the industry-leading Anypoint platform for APIs.